When I, female 19, was 14, I was sent to a boarding school a couple of hours away from my house. I actually really enjoyed it and thought living in a house full of my best friends was the best thing ever. I spent about 3 years there. When I was 15, in year 10, I stayed in one of our 4 dorms in the house, being D dorm. Now, there was a rumor that D dorm was haunted because of lights that would flicker and things of the sort, but nothing ever remotely, extremely, and frankly, I still don't believe in any sort of paranormal activity. So the rumors went completely over my head, my friends alike. One day though, I overheard a group of my friends doing something in the room next to me. The walls between rooms didn't reach the ceiling, and so you could hear everything throughout the dorm most of the time. I went to investigate what my friends were doing, and I found that one of my best friends, Brittany, had brought a Ouija board along with her and was playing it with a group of my friends. I was somewhat fascinated since I heard about it when I was really young but never actually had the opportunity arise to see one in action. So there I am, watching and bantering with my friends as they played it, along with my friend Jess, who was spelling out on the notes of her phone each thing that the board was saying. The girls were asking it things like their birthdays, things like that. At one point, the girls asked me to get a student that none of us knew, and so I went and invited one of the Chinese exchange students to come into the room. This was someone none of us had spoken to. The girls asked the board her birthday and were pretty shocked when the board gave them a birthday, which the student confirmed as hers, since none of us had been friends with her. After that, everyone decided to stop playing. That is, everyone except Brittany, who invited me to play it with her. God, I wish I had never touched that thing. But I agreed, and so we continued to play with it, just Brittany and I, in the room, along with Jess, who was still writing out the letters. I was one orchestrating the session, asking simple questions like, is there anything here with us? Give us a sign if you're here, etc. After receiving a yes, but no spooky sign, I asked the entity what its name was, to which the planchette began to go back and forth, spelling Z-O-Z-O-Z-O-Z-O-Z-O. Brittany and I had no idea what this meant at the time, so we weren't exactly moved by it. This is until Jess Googled it, and without telling us what came up, ordered us to stop playing at that second. We took our hands off and didn't say goodbye. Jess revealed her phone screen to us, and to our shock it was a reference of the name of a supposed demon, Zozo, which gained notoriety lurking on Ouija boards, even had a movie made about it. We were creeped out, but nothing too crazy. Every night for the following 3 weeks, Brittany and I both woke up every night at 3 a.m. feeling strange, and we were both having horrific nightmares. This continued for exactly 3 weeks, and started and stopped for both of us on the same days. After the nightmare stopped, I didn't pay much mind to what had happened, as demonic energetic attachment was the last thing on my mind really, and just put the strange dreams and awakenings to anything else subconsciously, I guess. For the following year, her and I both didn't experience anything out of the normal. That is, nothing I registered as strange anyways. After a year, I moved away to Europe, and this is where the activity peaked. We moved into a modern, bold house. At first, nothing seemed out of the ordinary with the house, but pretty quickly I began feeling strange occasionally, feeling watched pretty intensely, things moving on their own in front of me, seeing shadows in the corner of my eyes, doors slamming, the attic lights switching on and off when the door was locked, hearing knocks from the attic, feeling a presence go from the room I was in into the stuffed bear next to me extremely intensely. My grandma's old wind-up music box playing on its own. Just an all-around feeling of just something being off. In general, the activity would only happen when I was alone. I would tell my family, but they would just brush it off as all in my head, other than my sister, who also told me she felt weird in the house. That is until one day where my mom called me into her room to show me one of our coat hangers swinging back and forth wildly. This opened her mind ever so slightly, but she continued to brush it off. As times went on, the activity became more and more intense. Looking back, there was actually some really freaky shit going on in that place. I recall one time, I was home alone for a few weeks, where I was sitting in bed watching TV at around 2 in the morning when I felt something sit on the end of my bed. The blanket moved and there was an impression where this weight had come onto. On top of this, I could feel something staring at me. One of the most unsettling things that happened to me in this house, though, was an occasion where my big sister, who was my best friend, and I were hanging out in her room where we always spent time together. When you walk into the room, directly opposite the door, leaning against the far wall, was a large full-body mirror that we would use to look at our outfits, rarely ever getting close enough to touch, and always being able to see any marks on it, since it was the first thing you'd see when you'd enter the room. One night her and I were on the bed when she got up to go to the bathroom. Upon entering the room, my sister asked me if you touched the mirror. I said no, and my sister went pale and pointed at the mirror. When I saw it, my blood ran fucking cold. Right on the mirror, there was the biggest handprint I've ever seen in my life. This thing was roughly 35 centimeters long, and it was intact. You could see the mark of each joint of the finger. It was clearly not dragged or out there earlier because, as I said, it's the first thing you see when you enter the room. I just about shat myself. We called for my mom to look at it, and she attempted to tell us that it was drag print from maybe an attempt to move the mirror, a claim we contested heavily. Another disturbing occurrence was a time when I had left an unfinished painting sitting vertically inside my room. However, the face of the girl in my painting was horizontal. When I woke up, the painting has very clear tears running down the girl's face horizontally. I also had a vision, kind of experience once, when I was drifting off to sleep, where I saw a multitude, maybe 7 or 8, demonic or spooky looking faces staring at me while I had my eyes closed. I never experienced anything similar before or after that, but I can still see the faces if I think of them. Many unexplainable things happened over the 3 years we lived in the house, and needless to say, it was a relief and a fucking half to have moved out, and to another country at that. For about 3 weeks after we moved out of the house, the strange feelings of occurrences subsided. That is until one night where I woke up, wide awake around 5 a.m., with a very intense feeling of dread. I was able to get back to sleep. The following night, my sister and I were sleeping in the same bed, and I had an extremely vivid dream of watching myself and my sister sleeping from the perspective of something that was in the top left corner of my room. Needless to say, I was pretty unsettled at that thought that this entity may have followed me. I don't know if I came from the board or if it came from the house, but recently, it's getting worse, and it's getting worse very quickly. I was at a girlfriend's house about a month ago with her and 3 dudes when I started talking about it. Upon talking about it, all the doors in the house slammed except for one, the bathroom door, which was in view for all of us, which began to open and close wildly. This scared the absolute shit out of me, and Sarah could tell. So she locked the door and we decided to stop talking about it. This is where things began to get a little crazy, but I swear to God I'm not crazy. At least I'm pretty grounded and in touch with reality, and I really experienced this. It was the same night, and I had gone to sleep downstairs around 1:40 a.m. after a night of drinking and smoking weed, so I was pretty ready to sleep and should have had little issue with sleeping well. I woke up at around 3:30, feeling very, very uncomfortable. Sarah had actually told me the previous owner of the house had died in the room above me, which didn't help. I tried and tried to go to sleep, but couldn't. Every time I was about to drift off into sleep, it was like something jerked me awake. This was until about 6 in the morning, where I was trying to get to sleep when I began to hear a sound which can be compared to a sound of rushing water or TV static in my left ear. This went on for about 3 seconds until the sound became background noise to a somewhat raspy whisper-like voice, which told me to come. This experience really freaked me the fuck out, and the occurrences have been getting worse since. Rather than feeling watched only at home or when I'm alone, it began to happen when I was in public, in the car, during the day, and at night. I've also been seeing shadowy figures in my peripheral vision multiple times a day. I've also had the sensation of being touched by something when I'm alone at night, either on my phone in bed or trying to sleep. The feeling is like a kind of staticky, electric pins and needles feeling, but it's very clear. I have felt it on my arms, my hands, and thighs. I've felt it on my backside too. These things will move things very slightly when I look at them, if I'm with people, or do things like make the lights go off. As I look at them when I'm with people, which I have assumed it is making its presence known to me. About 2 weeks ago, I had a dream where I was getting into the car and I saw the same handprint from the mirror, only a lot bigger on the seat. It grabbed me by the throat and I woke up. I guess I should mention, I've had somewhat bad luck after moving into the original house too, with my very tight-knit family completely falling apart, being sexually assaulted on 2 occasions, and the death of a friend. I don't know if these have anything to do with it, but I guess it's worth mentioning. I know I might sound crazy, but I really just don't know what to do at this point. It's freaking me out, and I want whatever the fuck this thing is to stay far away from me for good. I don't know where to turn for help. I'm not religious, but tomorrow I plan on going to a church to speak to someone I can about it. If you read this far, thank you. And thank you to everyone that can give me any kind of advice on what to do. I really appreciate it. Summary. Mysterious knockers show up on our rural Texas farm in the middle of the night, on random dates and over the span of 2 years. I had a very close encounter. To set the scene, we lived just outside of town of about 30,000. It's 30 miles away from a major Texas city, but has a semi-rural feel. The property is 80 acres and connects to other similarly sized chunks of land, mostly owned by older family. We also knew the neighbors well. There's a small neighborhood that you pass to get to the dead-end section where our land is. Everything is very quiet except for occasional target practice and of course nature noises like coyotes, cows, donkeys, and dogs. Our property also backs up to a nature reserve, so though we are a few miles from town, it feels secluded. Our land is spotted with giant trees and cows. My grandparents' house sits 1/4 mile from the road. There's no reason for anyone to be on our property. My grandparents have a fairly large house, which before the events I'm about to describe, was ultimately also unlocked. And I was living upstairs with my parents. We're building their house. At this time, my parents lived in the apartment in the barn that is about 150 yards from the big house. My grandpa's sister, who lives on the property connected to the back corner of ours, had been telling the other family members that she was experiencing some strange knocking in the middle of the night on random doors on the outside of their house. Large house with several entrances. There was no pattern to when the knockers would show up. It was on different nights of the week at different times. Soon enough, we all began to experience the knockers. That's what we called them because, well, they knocked. But sometimes it would be weeks in between events, sometimes months. It had been quiet some time since the last event, and I thought And though it worried me some, my dad also bought night vision goggles and took some other precautions. It should be assumed that the owners of the large ranch farm would have guns, but especially in Texas. I mean, come on. For this reason, I've never been particularly afraid for my safety. You would have to be insane to creep up on a farmhouse in the middle of the night. In Texas, it is legal to shoot a trespasser on your property at night. After the night, though, I've been shaken up since. I would routinely get home late because I was bartending. Often I would take my time walking inside from the detached garage and just listen to the sounds of nature and admire the stars. However, when I pulled up this time and got out of the car, I had chills all over my body. It's hard to explain the immediate flood of fear that I felt. I quickly locked the door, turned on my flashlight app, and took off in the dead sprint to the house, looking immediately behind me. I checked all the doors to make sure they were locked, and turned out all the lights. I felt in full flight mode and my heart was racing, but I went upstairs and eventually I fell asleep. It was only when I spoke to my parents and grandparents the next morning that my previous panic became incredibly relevant. They both told me they experienced the knockers the night before. There was a 30-minute gap between times that they each heard knocking. Remember, they live about 150 yards apart. The garage sits between the two residences, which is where it turned out I was, parked my car during the 30-minute window. It is incredibly likely the knockers were just watching me pull up and enter the house. Since that night, I have been incredibly aware of my feelings like that. Trust your intuition. Also, one of the nights they hit my parents' barn, they apparently had some sort of stick and were just running it up and down the sides of the very large barn. It reminded me of that scene in The Strangers and the nature of the instance where the movie comparison always gave me the sickest feeling. It was like they were taunting us. This happened about 7 years ago. I was living with a friend. We were sharing a small apartment with a balcony. So someday, a man moved in the apartment next to ours. He came to introduce himself, and he seemed nice at first, but my opinion didn't last long. He started to invite himself at our place, staying for hours even though we'd give him hints that we wanted him to leave. We didn't really want to seem rude, but also we didn't want to hang out with him, so we started avoiding him and pretend we were not here when he'd ring at our door. Also, we saw him following us in town, but we thought we were being paranoid, and we had no proof. But some day, or should I say, some night, my friend had left for a few days to see her family. I was watching South Park in bed. I was about to sleep, so the lights were turned off. The glass door of the balcony was closed, but the shutters weren't entirely closed. I saw light coming from the balcony. At first I really thought I was seeing things, but I saw the light getting closer to the glass door. I got scared, so what did I do as an 18-year-old girl? I chose to hide under blankets, of course. Then I called my mom. I swear this is really what I did. Honestly, I really don't know why I did that instead of just calling the police. I guess I was so scared that I lost control. I just remember I absolutely did not want that person to see me. I guess it worked because when I looked through the blanket, I didn't see any more light. That person left. I was relieved and ran to close the shutters entirely. I'm pretty sure this was our neighbor, the person there. It was easy for him to get on our balcony, as his was next to ours, separated part with frosted glass and part with a small fence. Also, as I wrote, we've seen him following us. Again, I had no proof, so I didn't do anything. Luckily, It's been the last time I saw him. A few days later, a woman rang our door to ask us about the strange neighbor, asking if we've seen him lately. So I told her what happened, and that I think it might be him. She said it was probably him, that he actually was mentally disturbed, that she was his doctor, and that he had disappeared the day I just saw him. She asked if we could call her if we got to see him, so she can get him back to the hospital. We exchanged our phone numbers and she left. She called the next day to tell us she found him, and we've never heard about him again. Please don't be too rude. English is not my native language. I know I have been stupid to not call the police, but I can't change the past. So probably the right place to post. I live with my grandma on an acre of land off of a dark highway. Closest neighbor is 2 acres away across a ravine. Last night my grandma was asleep in bed and I was watching TV in the living room. I heard scuffling noises outside, followed by a thump, and then 3 light taps on the door. My dog starts barking and runs to the door. I wait on the porch. I do not open my door unless I'm expecting someone, especially after 10 p.m. Anyway, I moved towards the door to wave my hands at my dog in a very effective move to shut him up. Wasn't that effective? I listened since there was no peephole and heard nothing. Figure it was a raccoon. About an hour later, I heard scuffling at the window behind me, so I paused the TV to listen, and hear nothing. 30 minutes roughly, I hear the exact same thing as an hour and a half go by, only louder. Scuffling at the front door, a thump like something is falling from the roof, not on, from, and the 3 light taps at the door. My dog barked a little, but only once, then stopped. I'm freaked. I've never heard noises outside, unless it's raining, and pecans are hitting the tin roof, which was not the noise I heard last night. I can tell you that. I packed up and moved all my stuff to my room after closing all the blinds, and could faintly hear an alarm blaring. It was like it was muffled. I checked on my grandma, and it wasn't coming from her end of the house. I finally went to sleep with my hands over my ears and woke up feeling horrible and uneasy. I don't know what the fuck was at my door last night, but I think my inner alarm was going off. That's the only reason I can think to hearing alarms blaring faintly. My grandma heard nothing, but I definitely wasn't dreaming, because I would have woken up on the couch. And I was actively playing Sims while this was happening, so I know I wasn't asleep. The hell? This happened last night. My teenage daughter was coming back from dinner around 9:54 p.m. last night. She drives a distinctive car, an old caddy, and she loves it. So if someone knows her, they know it's her. A Jeep coming from the opposite direction weirdly stopped and flashed her to turn in. No stoplight, no sign to our neighborhood. Obviously, it was late and dark, and she has tinted windows, so they didn't see her 6'3" brother or her dad in the car. My partner told her to take the wrong turn in the neighborhood. Jeep went other way. She pulled into garage, lights off. The Jeep passed within seconds in front of the house and pulled in a driveway 2 houses down, reversed, circled, then passed the house again shortly after. At that point, she's in the house, and her brother and dad walked out and looked at the Jeep, which quickly pulled into another driveway and hauled ass out. Me and my friend had gone to Waffle House around 10 p.m. and there was a lot of people there. My friend kept complaining about how a dude was staring at her, but she's very striking, and I figured this dude was just I flirting with her. Finally I turn around and look, and a chill runs down my spine. Absolutely dead eyes, and this man is staring right past me, fixated on my best friend. I thought this was weird, because I thought he would look at me since I made it obvious, when I looked at him, that I was kinda pissed off. It was a real stop fucking looking at us look that I gave him. My friend is kinda panicking, cause she is so creeped out. So I'm like, okay, let's check out and leave. He's to the right of the register, and I looked at him almost the whole time we were checking out. At one point, I literally got right in front of my friend, like shielding her, because she was really stressed. She doesn't get spooked easily either. So when I stood in front of her, he started leaning to the side, looking around me to stay staring at her. I was pissed, because I hate when men feel entitled to make women uncomfortable. And plus his eyes were so wrong, just completely black and terrifying. He really had crazy eyes that were really wide open, and he never blinked for 5 minutes. I was staring right back at him. We peeked at him through the window on the way out of the parking lot, and he was still staring right at my friend. Very creepy, and it just reminded me to be aware of everything around me and to always trust my own or my friend's intuitions. When we feel something is wrong, just go ahead and assume something really is wrong, and we need to get the fuck out.